Welcome everyone to Sikh Heritage Month guest artist presentation. Let's take a moment first to do land acknowledgement. We acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Good afternoon and Sat Sri Akal, everyone. My name is Balwinder Mangat. I am Assistant Curriculum Leader of Science, STEM and Sustainability at Thistletown Collegiate Institute. It is a great honor for me to be a member of the TDSB Sikh Heritage Month Planning Committee and present to you the work of our guest artist, Sarindar Dhaliwal. Welcome to all of you to this presentation. Now let me share with you a brief biography of Sarindar Dhaliwal. Sarindar Dhaliwal was born in Punjab, India, and moved with her family to England at the age of 4, where she grew up in Southall, London. At age 15, she migrated again with her family to Canada. She received a BA in Fine Arts at Falmouth University, Cornwall, in England in 1978, then moved back to Canada, where she still lives. She gained a Master of Arts from York University in 2003 and a PhD in Fine Arts from Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. Dhaliwal has exhibited across Canada at institutions including the Arts Gallery of Alberta, the Koffler Center of Arts, Toronto, the Agnes Etherington Art Center, Kingston, and a Space Gallery, Toronto. An exhibition of her work, a record-keeping, toured England in 2004. Her work is in collections including the Walter Phillips Gallery, Canada Council Art Bank, and the Art Gallery of Ontario. Dhaliwal was the 2012 recipient of the Canada Council International Residency at Artspace, Sydney, Australia. Now I am going to present the work of Sarindar Dhaliwal through 2 videos. And here comes the first one. Enjoy.
Oranges and lemons, say the bells of St. Clements. You owe me 5 farthings, say the bells of St. Martin's. When will you pay me, say the bells of Old Bailey. When I grow rich, say the bells of Shoreditch. Pancakes and fritters, say the bells of St. Peter's. Sticks and an apple, say the bells of Whitechapel. Old Father Baldpate, say the slow bells of Aldgate. Pokers and tongs, say the bells of St. John's. Kettles and pans, say the bells of St. Lavender's blue, diddle diddle, lavender's green. When I am king, diddle diddle, you shall be queen. Call up your men, diddle diddle, set them to work. Some to the plough, diddle diddle, some to the cart. Some to make hay, diddle diddle, some to cut corn. While you and I, diddle diddle, keep ourselves warm.
Some people regard him simply as a racist, others as honestly reflecting the views of his constituents.
Mr. Enoch Powell, likening the Race Relations Bill to a match thrown onto gunpowder, says that immigration should be virtually stopped. The minister responsible for race relations has called Mr. Powell's speech extremely damaging.
Powell's speech was splashed across the Sunday papers, and we will trace the source of Powell's rivers of blood to his wartime service in India and to his burning ambitions to be Viceroy of India, following the footsteps of the illustrious Victorians and Edwardians who held that office. He's very much
But bringing temperatures up to around supernormal for a time, but then cold northerly winds returning, and once again we'll see further snow showers towards northern coasts and hills, especially later in the week. Parts of the coast of northeast England. There was a lot of sunshine throughout most of the British Isles, 10 hours worth of Cardiff in South Wales, but still some hail and snow showers, and again, most of these coming into northern Scotland. But for most of the British Isles, best temperatures were around 5 or 6, and reached 6 degrees on the Isles of Scilly. The wind dying down.
Bobby Shafto's gone to sea, silver buckles on his knee. You'll come back and marry me, pretty Bobby Shafto. Bobby Shafto's fat and fair, combing down his yellow hair. He's my love forevermore, pretty Bobby Shafto. Oh, where have you been, Billy boy, Billy boy? Oh, where have you been, charming Billy? Oh, where have you been, Billy boy, Billy boy? Oh, where have you been, charming Billy? I have been to seek a wife, she's the joy of my life, but she's a young girl and cannot leave her mother. I have been to seek a wife, she's the joy of my life, but she's a young girl and cannot leave her mother. Can she bake a cherry pie, Billy boy, Billy boy? Can she bake a cherry pie, charming Billy? She can bake a cherry pie in the twinkling of an eye, but she's a young girl and cannot leave her mother. The big ship sails in the alley-alley-o, the alley-alley-o, the alley-alley-o. The big ship sails in the alley-alley-o on the last day of September. The captain said it will never, never do, never, never do, never, never do. boat, the captain said it will never, never do on the last day of September. The big ship sank to the bottom of the sea, the bottom of the sea, the bottom of the sea. The big ship sank to the bottom of the sea on the last day of September. We all dip our hands into the deep blue sea, into the deep blue sea, into the deep blue sea. We all dip our hands into the deep blue sea on the last day of September.
The owl and the pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea green boat.
They took some honey and plenty of money, wrapped up in a 5-pound note.
They all looked up to the stars above and sang to a small guitar.
Oh lovely pussy, oh pussy my love, what a beautiful pussy you are, you are, you are.
What a beautiful pussy you are.
Pussy said to the owl, you elegant fowl, how charmingly sweet you sing.
Oh, let us be married, too long we have tarried, but what shall we do for a ring?
They sailed away for a year and a day
to the land where the bong tree grows.
And there in a wood a piggy wing stood,
with a ring at the end of his nose.
His nose, with a ring at the end of his nose.
The pig, are you willing to sell 1 shilling?
Your ring, said the piggy, I will.
So they took it away and were married next day
by the turkey who lives on the hill.
They dined on mince and slices of quince,
which they ate with a runcible spoon.
And hand in hand, on the edge of the sand,
they danced by the light of the moon. The moon, the moon.
They danced by the light of the moon.
I had a little nut tree, nothing would it bear, but a silver nutmeg and a golden pear. The King of Spain's daughter, she came to visit me, and all for the sake of my little nut tree. I had a little nut tree, nothing would it bear, but a silver nutmeg and a golden pear. The King of Spain's daughter, she came to visit me, and all for the sake of my little nut tree. Bobby Shafto's gone to sea, silver buckles on his knee. He'll come back and marry me, pretty Bobby Shafto. Bobby Shafto's fat and fit and fair, combing down his yellow hair. He's mine forevermore, pretty Bobby Shafto. Bobby Shafto's gone to sea, silver buckles on his knee. He'll come back and marry Bobby Shafto, pretty Bobby Shafto.
जपाना आया नीक नर्द मार के लिया रंग दी लाल कुड़े राता वसाना खांदा नी जिवें गुतनी नाल परांदा रहिंदा नाल कुड़े
हुण दस तेरी की रह गई नी जदों जुड़ के जनानी बह गई साडे नाल कुड़े तू चाहुंदी तैं पर जाइए नी असीं छड़े जहानों जाइए मंदड़े हाल कुड़े
मेरा वेख काल जा खिरदा ओदे वाल कटाई फिरदा कैंची नाल कुड़े ओदा रता वसाना खांदा नी जिवें गुतनी नाल परांदा रहिंदा नाल कुड़े
Lavender's blue, diddle diddle, lavender's green. When I am king, diddle diddle, you shall be queen. Call up your men, diddle diddle, set them to work. Some to the plough, diddle diddle, some to the cart. Some to make hay, diddle diddle, some to cut corn. While you and I, diddle diddle, keep ourselves warm.
Thank you for watching the first video, and I hope you enjoyed it. So let me play the second video for you now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this presentation. You have seen a 13-minute film and video project that was finished in 2010. And I wanted to show this image because the way that film is supposed to be viewed is what we call a 3-channel projection. Many galleries don't have the capacity for that because of space. So they do sometimes show a single 3-part film. So I made that film to address something that happened to me as a child. My mother would insist on washing my sister and my hair in warmed up homemade yogurt. And then she would put olive oil on our hair and then she would braid it. And my sister and I didn't like this because it was very difficult for us at school. I think it's difficult for many children of immigrant parents to be able to cope with wanting to assimilate into their adopted homeland and having a parent try to tether them to rituals that come from a different country like India. So we complained constantly to my mother. And she told us that if she didn't put olive oil on our hair, the sun was going to beat down on our scalps and we would go mad from the heat of the sun. Except that this was the 1950s in Britain, and there was a lot of smog because most people heated their houses with coal, burning fireplaces. So it never made sense to me, her explanation. Of course we weren't going to be burnt by the sun because there was hardly any sun. A lot of my work has dealt with childhood and what it means to be particularly perhaps Punjabi. I'm not going to I'm not going to discuss religious aspects of Punjabi culture, but mostly more how it affects a child growing up with Punjabi parents. So I loved reading, and I would go to the library and I would come home with stacks and stacks of books. This piece is called The Green Fairy Storybook. And again, it relates to my mother. There are 14 books. And one of the kinds of books I loved as a child was these anthologies of fairy stories, and they were all called by color. So the Yellow Fairy book, the Red, the Blue, the Lavender Fairy storybook. I had a table made for these books, and the carpenter that made the table managed to make it look like it was a table from the late 1950s. So you can see that he's distressed the surface. So I would lie on the couch reading these books, and my mother would just shout at me the whole time. She would say that if I didn't stop reading, I was going to fail at school. And so I still, even today, when I'm reading, I feel guilt. I should be doing the laundry or something else. So she instilled this attitude that I had about reading. The other thing was she could never give me rational answers. She started to tell me that I should call this person this, and that person this, and that person this. And I would ask, but why? And she wouldn't be able to tell me. She would just say, you have to do it. So it wasn't until 30 years later that I made this piece. So, as you know, most Asian languages differ from English in the sense that because family is more important in Eastern cultures, there are many, many words for relationships, family relationships. So you know that there's almost 6 words for aunt in Punjabi. There's your mother's brother's wife, mummy. There's your mother's sister, masi. There's your father's sister, and your father's older brother's wife, tai, and your father's younger brother's wife, chachi. In English, we just have this very generic in-law. And there are words for relationships like, for example, my brother's wife's relationship to my sister's husband. This is a very recent piece. It's called The First Wedding. It's an embroidered sheet or an embroidered piece of fabric that I think my mother wove. So in her village, they grew cotton. The women picked the cotton, they spun the cotton, and they wove the cotton into pieces of fabric. So when I was about 7, a Dhaliwal cousin got married. And they had brought over a 16-year-old woman, or girl I should say, from the Punjab to marry him. There was something wrong with this cousin. He was mentally unstable. And I kept saying to my mother, but what will she say when she sees his face? What will she say when she sees his face? In those days, you didn't get to see your husband or wife's face until after the ceremony. My mother said that his mother wanted him to have a normal life, meaning a wife and children. And it was at that moment I realized nobody cared whether she had a normal life. In fact, she had a terrible life with this man. And so I call this the first wedding because I think it's one of the reasons that I felt I had to escape some facets of that culture. I've done a lot of work on marriages. In 1986, I wrote 3 very short stories. Sorry, I thought it was right here. This one's called The Love Letters. What I remember best about Money are her large, slow-shaped eyes. She had the habit as a very small child of eating paper, any paper, but her favorite was wallpaper. In their house, whole rooms had areas of paper torn away where Money had stripped the lower walls. However, despite this addiction, her marriage had been fairly easy to arrange. So the story goes on about Money going with her mother to India, and she meets the man she's going to marry, agrees to marry him, and the couple start to write letters to each other. She began to tell him about the grumpy foreman at the cosmetic factory where she worked. His letters were full of insubstantial, polite formalities, phrased in the flowery, archaic English used by the village scribe. So Muni could not read or write Punjabi, and he couldn't express himself in any form of English. So even with this middleman involved in and interpreting their communications, her heart fluttered each time the blue airmail form dropped through the letter slot. She loved him already. Sometimes you're working about one particular ethnicity, and it bleeds over into other ethnicities. This piece is called Hey Hey Paula, and it came about because of the work I'd done on South Asian arranged marriages. In the New York Sunday Times, there used to be a section called the Society Pages, where women would announce their engagements or their upcoming weddings. So I collected for about 3 years all of these little pictures from the newspaper, and I ended up with about 600. And what was interesting to me was that all of these 600 women were wearing pearls. And I felt like I'd found this tribe who lived in the northeast part of the States, and they had this ritual. When they got engaged or married, they had to have their paper in the New York Sunday Times, and they had to be wearing pearls. Part of the installation has a rotary phone, and when you pick it up, it plays a 1963 pop song called Hey Paula, which was all about true love and meeting the person that you were supposed to marry. And I think that was also something that mystified me when I was a child. I was under this impression that there was only one person in the entire world you were supposed to marry. And it just wasn't possible that that person lived around the corner from you. They had to live in China or Australia. So, as a child, I battled with these things that I didn't quite understand. This is a piece from 1987, and it's called The Last Wedding. I think it was my brother's wedding. Something that I've never liked is this segregation of men and women that happens not so much today, but certainly in my lifetime, where in terms of going to the Gurdwara, women on one side, men on the other side, and then at weddings, men standing around drinking, and then when they're a bit tipsy, they start dancing, and the women are sitting there drinking tea, and they only dance when the men have all kind of said, it's okay to dance now. So that it was why it was called a last wedding. And it was also, going into my mother's house, and in the hallway are about 80 pairs of shoes. So I'm sure that you guys have been to functions where you go into the house and there's so many people there, it's just covered with shoes. Around the same time, I made this piece. And I made it because I realized that there are codes that only certain people can read. So, for example, in Hey Hey Paula, when I made that work, there was a woman in a studio nearby, and she had been engaged to a very rich person. She told me she jilted him at the altar, or maybe not at the altar, maybe before, but she kept the pearls. And she could look at those grainy photographs and she could tell me how much the pearls were worth, because she had an understanding. And I knew that the turban is a very important part of Sikh culture. But all turbans are different. They're very ephemeral because they're made of fabric. But at the same time, I found the culture very patriarchal and rigid. So I guess I was trying to say something about the fragility of fabric compared to this society that has so many rules. So here you see the blue turban. I was told only a Sikh who's lived in Uganda ties his turban that way. It used to be that you wore red or pink turban when you were married, and the orange turban is the way that someone who's religious or interested in a kind of military style religion would wear. When I've done these pieces, they no longer exist. The turban's untied and put into boxes. I think that these turbans sit on marble chips. This was made in 1989, but in 2004, I had a show that toured to Britain and to 3 venues in Canada. And the curators wanted this piece, but it no longer existed. So I had to redo it. I'm just showing you this turban piece. It's called Edging Towards Conversion. And it's the way that a lot of white Sikhs who've adopted the religion, they wear their turbans in these kind of tall, like pastry chef hats. And I use the color to indicate who was more converted. The white ones at the back are the way the men wear their turbans, and the red and pink ones are the way the women wear their turbans. So the first place that the piece was supposed to be shown was in Southampton, which is in England. And the curator of that gallery decided to ask these elders from the Sikh Gurdwara to come and, I don't know what, check. And these men came, and they told us that it was very disrespectful to have the turbans on the floor. So in each venue after that, the turbans, we had to make a place for them to sit that was not the floor. I think what I liked about this piece was, for me, they looked like flowers or something. And individually, they were all quite themselves, if you know what I mean. They were not similar to each other. And of course, I don't know how to tie turbans. So every place that this piece was shown, so there were 6 places, the turbans had to be tied by people in those locations. So my mother went back to the Punjab several times when I was growing up, and I refused to go with her because I had already developed this notion that the culture was very, not minding its own business, or it was always trying to find out, what you were up to and then report back. So all the time I was small, if I wanted to do something like wear shorts, or my mother would say, we don't want to do that. And I realized very quickly that this we wasn't her or me or us. It was the community. And I did wear shorts. And I got stung by a bee. And my mother said to me, see, I told you what would happen if you wore if you wore shorts. But in 1978, I did go back to India. I traveled with a boyfriend, and I just finished art school. So these are cow dung patties stacked by the side of the road. And to my eyes, trained in Western art history and art making, they look like minimalist sculptures. So this is from 78. This is from 2002. So I do find that the way the cow dung patties are stacked is very artistic. And cow dung patties are used to cook on in villages. And that first cow dung patty stack in 1978 finally bore fruit in 1992. I made this piece. It's made of paper and straw, and it was my idea of what my cow dung patty sculptures could look like. One of the cow dung patty sculptures I made was this, 800 little patties. I made them in a tea strainer. Here's a close-up of them. And there was a story that my mother used to tell me, but you would only find out what was behind this sculpture, or installation rather, if I was there to tell you. So in 2019, I had a show in Medicine Hat, and I actually wrote the story. So my mother told me that there was a woman in her village making cow dung patties, and you scoop the cow dung up, you make it into a sort of chapati shape, and you throw it at the wall. And it sticks to the wall, the sun dries the patties, and when they're hard, they're prized off the wall and then stacked. According to my mother, the woman who was making these cow dung patties, the wall fell on top of her and she died. And they took her inside and they cried all night. And in the morning, her knee moved. And my mother told me that she had been to paradise, where they told her that a mistake had been made and she was supposed to die in 4 years' time. According to my mum, she died exactly 4 years ago. So, so for the first time, you could see that 1993 work, or 92, alongside the story. And what I really liked was there was a bench in front of this piece, and there was a grandmother sitting with her 2 granddaughters. They were small, and she was reading this story to them as if she was reading them a bedtime book, and I liked that very much. This is what making the piece was like. So you have to make these kind of tubes of clay, and then you have to shape them into the letters. So my work also does rely on this woman, my mother, who, gave me a lot. So this is another story she would tell, and it was about a baby who became sick. And the mother and her aunt took her to many doctors. Nobody could heal her. And then they were certain the baby was going to die, and a tinker stopped by. A tinker is somebody who mends pots. And he told the women to take a freshly laid egg and put it in the crossroads. And when something crushed the egg, then the baby would recover. So that baby was me, and so I used the story that she told me to make this piece. But the one thing about my work is that often one piece will give birth to another piece, and they look like 2 different people made them. So this work, set in 1953, would not have happened if I hadn't made the work that came right before it. Okay, I'm just going to check that, yeah. So this piece is called Triple Self-Portrait with pomegranate and with persimmon and pomegranates. And it does have 3 portraits of me. And there's my mother. She's in the yellow suit on the top row. And things that I've worked with. So I was a weaver. I did a piece with zebras. I made things with feathers. I painted tulips, bananas, apples, mangoes. And it was also made because people said my work was decorative. And that's a term that's not very polite or about an artist's work. It kind of means it has no content or deep meaning. It's superficial. And so I said to myself, okay, if you think that's decorative, I'll show you what decorative really is. And so because this was a portrait of myself and people who influenced me, I wrote out the story of the little baby who was cured by her aunt and mother placing an egg in the crossroads. I wrote that story here, and I wrote another egg story that I performed. So this piece is I think it's from 1987, around then. And once I had written the story out, I just started to make eggs. And so that was how that installation with eggs came about. Another thing that I think I focused on a little bit is losing things. So I was in India in 1996, And they used to have painted billboards advertising products or movies. They were all hand painted. And by the next time I went to India, there was none of that left. Everything was produced in a digital way. So this is called Indian Billboard. And it's a watercolor. There's hardly any collage. There's just some rupee money. And because I don't read Hindi, I took that image of the goddess on a tiger, but I projected it the wrong way round. But rather than fix it, I just used a billboard from Britain and I projected that the wrong way. So if any Hindu person complained, I could say, well, these English people can complain too. This billboard I took a photograph of in Bangalore. And of course, we're talking 96. Bangalore was one of the most progressive cities in India because it was where the IT jobs were. And this was the first time I saw the dowry system being questioned in a feminist way. The other thing that India lost is the ambassador. So there was a point in time where virtually the only cars you saw in India were these ambassadors. And so I started photographing them, and it was good that I did, because we ended up making this work that's called 28 Ambassadors. All of the cars were tinted in different colors. You won't see many ambassadors today. India has quite a robust economy, so people are buying foreign cars. The other thing we lose are languages. So sometimes my work is, I just read something and I get an idea. So I read somewhere that 6 languages a day are suddenly becoming obsolete because there's no one left who speaks them. So the piece has these little curtains made out of turban material, and there's the country where the language belongs to, and at the top, because I made the first piece in India, I didn't really have, there was just this ladder, and it was made with bits of bamboo sort of tied together with string, and I was too scared to climb up really high. So the top row is always places that I would have liked to have visited but hadn't. But I've gone to these places now: Australia, Chandigarh, Dublin, not all of them, but some of them. And there's a lot of funny stories I could tell you about this piece. So I called it Curtains for Babel, X, Y, and Z. Because there were so many languages, I had to narrow it down. But sometimes, for example, I had used Welsh as a language that was dying. And then I showed in Wales and I realized, no, it's not dying. Children speak it. They're taught to speak it in school. There's a TV and radio in Welsh. And so I had to change that. And the hotel I was staying I mean, I picked a language called Walloon, which actually is not dying, so sometimes I make mistakes. Walloon is a language that's spoken in Belgium. And I thought, in this little town in Wales, there's not going to be anyone who speaks Walloon. But sure enough, the receptionist at the hotel did speak Walloon. And sometimes countries change their name. So I had used Congo, but it started to be called the Democratic Republic of Congo, and that was too long to fit under the curtain. And because it was being shown at Canada House in London, they were afraid that diplomats from the Congo would come and then they would be upset that I hadn't written the proper name down. Also, reading a page and a half by Salman Rushdie, I made 3 works. They were all called Hobson Jobson. So Rushdie's writing about a dictionary that was published in India in the late 1800s, and it's called Hobson Jobson. And it lists words that come from Indian languages. Words like dungarees, bungalow, veranda, shampoo. Sorry, I don't have very good images of this piece, but it is 3-dimensional, and it's based on some temple doors, an image that I found. So, I have a body of work, it's called The Cartographer's Mistake. And the cartographer I'm talking about is a man called Cyril Radcliffe. Cyril Radcliffe was sent to India in 1947 by the British government. He was not a cartographer, he was a barrister. But he was supposed to draw the partition lines that separated India, what remained of India, and the new Islamic nation of Pakistan. And those demarcation lines are called the Radcliffe line. Radcliffe had never been east of Paris. They put him in a bungalow, gave him inadequate maps, and also pressured him to include certain areas. He was pressured by politicians, by religious leaders. So, for example, Kashmir, which should really have gone to Pakistan, it was Nehru, the future Prime Minister of India, the first Prime Minister of India. It was his home state, and it's very beautiful, and he wasn't going to let it go to Pakistan. But partition happened in August of 1947. By October of 1947, Pakistanis and Indians, the army, were fighting each other over Kashmir. So the mistake has it's been a factor in quite a lot of issues that have happened in India. This is also another cartographer's mistake piece. Oh, I just want to go back to... So, West Pakistan is yellow, East Pakistan is white marigolds, and the rest is India. This piece was shown again, and that time the gardener, the curator told me the gardener was very proud of himself because he grew the marigolds from seed. But what he did was he planted all the colors willy-nilly, which was not what the piece was supposed to be about. I guess he missed that bit about West Pakistan and East Pakistan. But then somebody pointed out that that second gardener had actually planted a map of pre-partition India. So one of the things that the British did was they introduced sports to their empire. And ironically, most of those countries, Australia, India, South Africa, are much better at cricket and some of these other sports. So they're all made, the sports equipment is all made in marble and they sit on a bed of salt. Sometimes when you're an artist, you just make decisions based on aesthetics. So I used salt for the base. And I used it because I thought it was beautiful. But then someone wrote about it and said that the salt was a reference to Gandhi's march to the sea, because the British taxed Indians very highly on certain materials. So there's a close-up of that. Sometimes I get an idea just from a scene in a movie. So this is called Rajasthani Cricket Pad. And the movie was Lagan, which was a Bollywood movie. And it's also set at the end of the 19th century. And it's about a cricket match played by villagers who are very poor and the British Army. And it's a wager. And it's all about taxes as well. In the movie, the British, when they come to play the match, they're dressed in whites, perfectly attired. The villagers, of course, don't have cricket gear. But there's a scene where one of the women in the village is making cricket pads, and she's making them with cotton, rolls of cotton, and she's sewing them onto strips of bamboo. So just that little scene inspired this piece. I made this when I was doing my PhD. It's a work from 2018, and I was writing about immigration. And so my dissertation was a mixture of theory, fiction, and biography. So I had invented a character who came from Trinidad. He was a young man, maybe 18 years old. He was very good at cricket, and he came over on the Windrush, which was a boat, a ship, which brought 500 black men from the Caribbean to Britain to work as labor. Britain really needed workers after the Second World War. But this young man could not play cricket at the level he wanted to. He was a bus conductor. And I don't know how many of you know that, often when you get into a taxi, the driver will tell you that he used to be a doctor or something else in the country he came from, but arriving in Canada, he's not really allowed to work his métier. We're almost coming to the end. So I often repeat things in my work. You'll see here those temple doors that were used in Hobbs and Jobson. I've used this motif. It's a picture I took in 1974 in Portugal, and it was tiles. And I started to use text to describe things. So I had read about Maharaja Dulip Singh. He was, when he was 9, I think, his father was killed, and his father was a prince of the Punjab, and the British decided to whisk him away. They put his mother in jail. He was sent to a boarding school in Switzerland, and in the end, he ended up living in Britain. But when Sikhs came to honor him, they were seen as something dirty that was entering this pristine village. So I'm going to just end with a little bit about why I think my work ended up being so narrative driven. So my mother knew that Christmas happened, and she knew you were supposed to give presents to children. But what the Punjabi community in Southall, where I grew up, didn't realize that Christmas happened on the 25th of December. They started to give presents in October. And my mother would take those presents and she would put them in a cupboard, and then she would give them to other children. So I grew up with hardly any toys. But I had pencils, not as many as you see here, because as an artist, I collected a lot of pencils. The piece is 30 feet long. It's very big. And each pencil sort of tells you a history. Like the shorter ones are the greens I loved the best. So I guess I don't really like that green very much. So not having any toys, I played with pencils. I probably only had about 12 then. And I made up stories. So if its tip was broken, it couldn't go to work. It had to go to the hospital, which was a pencil sharpener. I also played with cards, decks of cards, and I made up stories about them. So there were 4 families, spades, hearts, diamonds, clubs, and each card had a gender and an age. So 3 was quite small, he was male, 9 was female, 10 was a female. And in my world, the only person who was old enough to have a romantic relationship was the 10. But she could only have a romantic relationship with 3 people. And those were the jacks of the other suits. So I spent a lot of time as a kid on the floor, in my own world, like making up these stories. And I think that's a big factor in the kind of work that I've made.
I hope you all enjoyed the presentation by our guest artist, Sarindar Dhaliwal. Thank you all for joining this presentation today. It was a pleasure to be a part of this event. Have a great rest of the day, everyone. Thank you.